welcome in everyone to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Friday, December 13th around here, and we have a great show for you today. Bill Belichick has officially been hired at UNC, so let's look ahead a little bit. Let's look at 2025. Let's look at that schedule, give you guys an idea of what he's capable of, some of the pitfalls of what that is, and then what's the expectation as he heads into year one. Obviously, they have changed, but how much have they changed, at least in year one? Then we'll get to the CFP tiers. I'll talk about which teams I think can actually win a national title, talk about which teams are very dangerous, one team that probably just needs a Herculean effort from one guy, and I think we all know who I'm talking about. Then we'll get to the CFP X Factor players. I'll get to all the players from every single team that I want to see a lot from in the playoff. I think could totally change the dynamic of an offense or a defense, could change the way a team looks as you head into the playoff. Then we'll get to a little bit of transfer portal updates, a lot of different things happening. We'll get to some losers of the transfer portal thus far. A lot of teams have purged a lot of guys and definitely have a ton of work to do over the next month and a half or so. Then we'll get some headline updates. The biggest one of the bunch is Dan Mullen is on his way to Las Vegas, one thing that we actually forgot on yesterday's show. So I want to break that down for you guys, and then a couple other different things from around the country I want to break down. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, you can click that $, add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop up on the screen and we can have a fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible, so utilize that. You can get your question on the screen and we can have definitely a fun interactive conversation here. But let's go ahead and jump into this thing, and this is a rather complicated question. What is Bill Belichick capable of in year one is a question that is going to be really, really hard to answer. And just some quick updates so people understand where we are right now. It is a 5-year deal for $10 million annually. The one kind of caveat in there that is very interesting is until June 1st, the buyout is a normal buyout. As a June 1st of 2025, it's a very normal buyout. It is exactly the way that normal college football coaches work it out. After that date, it drops to $1 million. Now, does that mean he wants to have the door open to possibly go to a couple NFL openings? Is it just to make it easier to move forward with his successor if you want to do that earlier on? What does that look like? I don't really know, but it's definitely something that caught a lot of people's eyes and definitely could be a sign that Bill Belichick doesn't seem on setting up shop at UNC for too long. It does seem like he wants to be there for a while. It doesn't seem like he's running out the door at the very first opportunity, but it feels like he gave himself a little bit of an escape hatch. If someone starts to call from the NFL that he feels inclined to take, he could probably get out of that for only $1 million. Obviously, is something that he'd be willing to do. So that's kind of the one big caveat to the contract at the very least. But the big time thing that we found out, or really was kind of known as we were going into this, but especially found out over the last little bit, is this was a big time struggle behind the scenes. This was a lot of people on one side wanting one thing, which seemed to be John Summerall, the head coach from Tulane, and then a lot of people from the other side wanting one thing, which was Bill Belichick. The people on the one side with Bill Belichick are the ones that write the checks, and that's kind of the difference maker here. They said, we are going to invest X amount of money if Bill Belichick is hired. That's the difference maker. We all know in the world of college football, you need a certain level of investment if you want to be successful in this sport, if you want to be a contender in this sport. If Bill Belichick's the only one that's going to get you that, you better hire Bill Belichick and just see where you land at the end of it. So here's the reality of the situation. The UNC Athletics have just changed the way they allocate money. Full stop. They have totally changed the way that they are going to go about business around their athletic department. I'm not saying the basketball program is going to fall off a cliff. They got plenty of money to go around, but they are going to put more investment into football going forward, win or lose. So that's kind of the reality of this is you better win. There's going to be a lot of people that are putting a lot of money towards this over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. If Bill Belichick doesn't put the records that they want on the table, they might have a problem with that. So the question becomes, what is the record you want on the table? What is the record that would be okay, at least in year one, as we talk about this right now? What are the things that you're going to have to be able to do in year one that Bill Belichick will be able to sit back and say, okay, give me that investment next year, and everyone will feel more than fine with that? Well, it all starts with the recruiting effort, right? You have to go out and find guys. I don't know if Jacoby Criswell is going to stay around. I don't know who the starting quarterback is. Frankly, I would almost bet with you that about 70% of the roster is not in Chapel Hill yet. I would bet about 70% of the 2025 roster for UNC is just not on that team yet. I assume they will be on that team in the next month or so, and then we'll see what happens from there. It's going to be a really, really crazy process, and to be totally honest, this first year is probably not going to be the exact Bill Belichick team that he wants. It's obviously the way that it works with just about every single first-year head coach. They come in, they do with what they do what they can with what they have, and then they move forward and try to continue to build things. Now, the big time question here is how are they going to recruit? And frankly, probably going to be Deion Sanders in Colorado 2.0. It's probably going to be a lot of scouting other teams in college football. It's going to be pulling kids from those teams to play on your team. Now, the big question of that is that's still very different than what it is in the NFL. That's still very different than scouting a 5-year senior that has played a ton of snaps, that knows exactly what he's doing, and is coming to you as a relatively polished kid. Now you're looking at a freshman or a sophomore that is not quite all the way there. How does that kind of change with Bill Belichick? Because the reality is he's done an incredible job of putting together winning products. A lot of those players that came to him were finished products when they came to him. So that's kind of the that's the chief difference between the way that he's going to have to handle business at the NFL level comparative to the college level is he's going to have to be a little bit more of a developmental piece in this. And obviously, I think he's more than capable of doing that. But at the end of the day, it is a new challenge for him. It is a different challenge. And if he's a part of the talent acquisition, which I have to assume he will be at least in some respect, he is going to have to evaluate these players differently because I think we all agree a lot of those NFL drafts for the Patriots when Belichick was the GM were not necessarily inspiring. Let's just leave it at that for the time being, but it's one of those things where it's a totally different evaluation process. It's a totally different talent acquisition process, although people will tell you this is entirely the NFL now. It is very different from the NFL for a number of different reasons, including the people that you have to deal with in this process. So there's a lot of different things that are going to change in the way that Bill Belichick has to go about business, especially in the world of recruiting, especially in the world of just evaluation. And one of the big time questions is, are you going to lean into high school recruiting? You're probably not going to very much. They sit at 90th in high school recruiting right now. Their best recruit, Bryce Baker, has not signed and is looking elsewhere. If you can get that guy on campus, then you're in a really, really good place. You're definitely taking steps in the right direction. If you can't, then you might have a little bit of a problem on your hands. So you got a lot of different things to worry about right about now. Obviously, the portal is going to be the biggest thing for 2025 and probably going forward for UNC, but they got to be able to pull in some guys from high school, and that is not an easy thing to do for a head coach that is used to evaluating guys that are relatively polished products, relatively to the place that they're going to be for the rest of their career. A sophomore in high school, a junior in high school is not nearly to that level. So those are a couple of the pitfalls that you could find. But let's look at the schedule here for a second because it's manageable. It's not necessarily easy by any means. You got 2 games against TCU and at UCF that are going to be tough. One way or the other, that those are going to be interesting. The fact that Scott Frost against Bill Belichick is happening is very interesting to me. But at the end of the day, those are 2 games that are going to be tough. Relative toss-ups probably would lean in the direction of the other team, but UCF is a unknown product right now. TCU didn't have the greatest year, but I'd lean that direction in the opening game of the year, at least right now. But then you get into the conference schedule, and you're able to avoid Miami, SMU, and Louisville. You do get Clemson, you do get Syracuse, you do get a team like Duke, but you don't necessarily have this murderer's row. You do have the ability to win a lot of these games. A lot of them are going to be toss-ups, and a lot of them are going to possibly go your direction because you got a really good defensive coach on the other side. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this. And then what is good in this schedule? As UNC fans look at this schedule, I have to wonder what is good. What is good enough for Bill Belichick in year one? From where I'm standing, I think 6-6, 7-5 is very, very good, if I'm being totally honest. Given all of the crazy moving parts that are happening right now, given that they're pretty much past the time where they can recruit high school kids, given a lot of the different factors here, I think 7-5 would be a great year. I think it would be a great start to this process, and then I think they could take another leap in 2026. Are the fans okay with that? Are the fans good with rolling out with a 7-5 season and then moving forward to 2026 is a question that will only be answered in time, really. So all of this stuff is going to go into it, and you have a ton of different questions. You are going to lose a lot of guys like Omarion Hampton. Kobe Paysour has already left through the portal. You have a lot of different guys that are going to be walking out of this program. You also have a lot of guys that are going to want to stick around, and keeping Freddie Kitchens is one of the decisions that he has made. It sounds like he is going to stick around. That will help them to at least give a little bit of a kind of bridge between Bill Belichick and these players that are on the team currently. Hopefully they can keep some of those talented players around, and then you got to build out the rest of the staff, which obviously people have pointed toward Josh McDaniels as a possible OC. I know he's close with the Weiss family, so Charlie Weiss Jr. would be a fantastic pickup if he was able to do that. Be a little bit surprised if he was, but absolutely would be a great pick if he was able to do that. And then you obviously have Steve Belichick. He will be on this staff if I had to imagine. I really can't see another reality, because one way or another, whether it's, he's set up to be the head coach in waiting or any of that type of stuff, I don't know that that's the case. We will find that out obviously in time, but the reality is he's going to be on this staff, and you're going to need someone on this staff that is going to be able to take over at some point, because the reality is Bill Belichick is 72. At some point, he is going to hang him up. At some point, probably within the next 5 years, he will not be the head coach at UNC anymore, and you need a guy there that is ready to take over. You have to assume it will be Steve Belichick if he is on that staff. Obviously, a lot of still moving parts around that. So when you look at this, you have a lot of the infrastructure in place over there. You have the money that you need. You have the investment, and you have a lot of talent to choose from that area, both in high school and in the college football realm. It just comes down to evaluation. It just comes down to these people that have spent so much of their time, so much of their energy at the NFL level, going down and having to recalibrate the way they go about business, because it is a different caliber of player that you're evaluating. It is a different thing you're looking for. It is different people that you're dealing with, not so much agents, but quote unquote agents. And you have to deal with that. All of that stuff just comes with the territory. How much is Bill Belichick willing to deal with that? How much will he deal with that? And then on top of that, if he doesn't deal with the recruiting part of this at all, will these players feel close enough to him? Will they have the connection to him to not leave after 1 year? All of this is questions that will have to be answered. All of this is curiosity that will be very, very hard to get an idea of. We'll figure out more in January. Once we have a little bit of a roster, once we have a big-time staff and we know exactly where all the pieces fit, we'll have a better idea of what year one is going to look like under him. But I can tell you a couple of things. I know it's going to be very tough, but I also know that they can compete for that. When you have that guy in that building, that is going to be one of the expectations of your team. You have every ability to possibly pull that off. It's just going to take a lot of work and a lot of recalibration from some people in that building. Now, all of those people are more than capable. So I'm not necessarily betting against them. I cannot wait to see how this unfolds. I love that Bill Belichick is in college football, because it gives you juice. Same reason why I love Deion Sanders in college football. It brings eyes. It shows people just how special the sport is, and love that he's here. We'll see how it works out. Definitely going to be a really interesting thing, both from expectations to the way they evaluate players, to the talent they can get, to how long that talent will stay. All of this is big-time questions around this new hire, but it's going to be a fascinating year one, that's for sure, and I promise you we will break it down in depth throughout that time. But let's go to our first break here, and when we come back, let's get to the CFP tiers. Let's talk about who I actually think can win a national title, who I think probably can't, who I think would need lightning in a bottle if they were going to get it done, and we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.